Welcome to Digital Literacy, a guide to using technology and journalism. For our second look at computing, we're going to take a look at a couple of different areas. First thing we're going to do is we're going to explore email a little bit and talk about some tips and tricks, things to help you deal with email a little bit better than you have in the past, perhaps. Maybe some of this will be stuff you've already dealt with, but email is one of those things where you can do it well, or you can do it really poorly. And our experience has been some students really sort of struggle with email there. We're also going to wander around the web a little bit and take a look at a couple of different things there. And we're going to ponder social media for a little bit and talk about some different things in the social media realm that you should be aware of and some things that you should definitely be participating in, and sort of cue you in on some things that we're going to be dealing with a little bit later on in the semester. So let's get started with email first. Email is a wonderful tool, except that it's a really terrible tool. It's quick, it's efficient, it's semi-permanent, but it's also a terrible tool for journalism, which is a really funny thing to say out loud. One of the biggest problems that you have with email is that it's very easy to ignore. And as a member of the faculty here, I can tell you right up front, there's an awful lot of students that ignore email or who don't know how to use it well. So let's talk about a couple of things that you should do as soon as you get a new email account. One of those things is think about your email address. Now, you've got a uga.edu email address, and you have that for as long as you're in school. However, once you leave school, that email account is going to disappear. So you should really be thinking about getting a more permanent professional email address. Now, whether you build it off of your a Gmail account or somewhere else, entirely up to you. Gmail is wonderful. It's a great repository. It's reasonably stable, although every now and then it does sort of flake out, but only once or twice a year, and they seem to recover pretty well. So I would go ahead and get yourself a Gmail account or a Hotmail account or a Yahoo account or something like that. The better option is actually to build your own email account by registering a domain name that becomes your website as well as your email address as a hosting option for your email address. But all of that's another conversation for another day that we're not going to have time for today. But let's talk about signatures. Signatures are really great things. A signature, or what we used to call a .sig file, is something that gets appended to every email that you send out. And it's a great way to give more information about yourself and how to get in touch with you. It's a neat thing to have at the bottom of your email address, because if you send somebody an email and they say, you know, I have a quick question on this, you can put your phone number in there, maybe you put your instant messenger address in there, your Twitter account. If somebody reads something and they think, hey, this is really smart, and you've got a website link down at the bottom there, it's a great way for people to take a look at what it is that you're doing. So I'm going to show you my signature. This is what goes out at the bottom of all of my university emails. I put my name down there because sometimes I forget to sign my emails. I put down my title, so photojournalism lecturer, which is what my official title is here, and I put down where I work, so the Grady College of Journalism and Mass Communication, the University of Georgia in Athens, Georgia. All of that is identifying information. It adds some authority, some credibility. And then below that, I put in 4 different ways that folks can get in touch with me. My email address is there, my office phone number is there, my website for the university is there, and then also the blog that I run, the visualjournalism.info blog. So all of that information is now appended to every single email that I send out, whether it's to a student, to a colleague, or somebody on the outside. They've got 4 different ways of tracking me down at this point in time. So again, it's all about making sure that you can be contacted easily. Let's talk very quickly about etiquette in email. As a faculty member with a university email address, I get an awful lot of email from students. Now, some of them are students that I know, they're students that I've had in the past or currently have, but I get quite a number of emails from students who I have no idea who they are. And one of the things that absolutely drives me insane is when the email starts out with, hey, which is really informal, which is great if you're my brother or my wife or one of my kids, but if I have no idea who you are and you're coming to me looking for information, for access to a class, or for job leads, what you've told me in the first 3 letters that you've typed is you're not very professional. So think about etiquette all the time. Make sure that you're using proper spelling, proper grammar, and that you're being professional. There's nothing that turns me off quicker than having a very, very casual email from somebody who I don't know who's asking me for something. Something else to think about is quoting back. If I send you an email and then you respond to it, one of the things that really helps me out is if you quote back the original email. And what I like to do is I have all of my mail clients set up so that when I respond to an email, it takes the email that I'm responding to and puts it down below my signature. And what that allows the recipient to do is, if I respond to a question, but they're not sure what the question was, they can go back and they can check that. Now, if you're having a long conversation with somebody, that can get a little tiresome after a while because the emails grow in length to be really difficult to read. Another thing to make sure you're doing is make sure that that quote is at the bottom. Some email clients will allow you to highlight an area within an email, and then when you hit reply, it's going to take that and mark it as part of the reply and put it up above the signature. That's fine as well if there's specific parts there. Occasionally you'll want to do a little copying and pasting, but make sure it's clear which part of the email you're writing and which part of the email is being quoted. Now, email accounts come in two very broad varieties. The first is something called POP3, and the second is called IMAP. POP3 was sort of the initial standard for email, and POP stands for Post Office Protocol, and it works just like Post Office. You email somebody, and if they are on a POP3 account, they go read the email, and if they download it to the client, it takes it out of their mailbox, puts it on their local computer. The more modern system is something called IMAP, which stands for Internet Message Access Protocol. Now, your UGA email accounts are IMAP accounts, and what this means is your email sits on the server, and you can set up a standalone email client like the Apple Mail program or Microsoft's Outlook program or Thunderbird or Eudora or something like that. And with an IMAP account, it synchronizes what sits on the server and what sits on your local machine. IMAP is great, particularly if you're going to be accessing your email from multiple computers. Back when we started dealing with email, POP3 accounts were fine because most folks only had one device that they were going to check their email on, their home or office computer. Now we're in a situation where I have 3 computers at home, I've got an iPad, I've got an iPhone, I've got other mobile devices, I've got my work account, and sometimes I'm working on somebody else's machine. So having all of my emails sit on a central server is really important. Now, most of you will probably never come across a POP3 account, but if you're ever given the option of POP3 or IMAP, go for IMAP. Again, Gmail, Yahoo, Hotmail, and the UGA email servers are all set up for IMAP. It's the best way to be handling these things. Now, web or client-based email accounts. Again, if you've got an IMAP account, the web access is always going to be there. If you've got a POP3 account, as soon as you download it into a standalone client, it's going to disappear off of the server. Now, I personally prefer to work in a client type of system. What this means is that whenever I go online, it synchronizes my local email client with what's sitting on the server, and then if I'm, say, on an airplane and I don't have web access, I can still read and write email, and anything that I write or respond to, as soon as I go online again, it's automatically going to send that. So those clients are really nice. You also get a little more control in a couple of different areas, particularly with formatting and things like that. So personally, I love Apple's Mac Mail client. I know some folks absolutely love Thunderbird. There's a few folks left still using Eudora, and Outlook is great because it sort of gathers together a whole bunch of different things all in one client. All right. Once you start getting a lot of email, you need to start doing something with it. So you want to start sorting it into different folders. So you may want to go ahead and have one folder for each of your individual classes. So whenever the professor or a classmate sends you a question or an assignment or a response to a question, you can keep it all together. You can also do this with something called tags. Gmail uses the phrase tags, but it's a folder. And what it allows you to do is sort of keep your inbox cleaned up and not having a whole lot of information in it. Filters and rules are wonderful things that you can set up, and you can set them up either at your web interface or on a client interface, depending upon what you want to do. And what it will essentially allow you to do is you can take email that's coming in and you can have your machine or your server automatically process it. So for instance, here at UGA in the Grady College, every week or so you get an email from Career Services. Now those are things that you should be reading, but maybe you don't want to read them right now. You can set up a filter or a rule, as it's called in the UGA mail system, that will take that and automatically move it over into a specific folder based on the email address it comes from or a couple of keywords or phrases that are in the subject or the body of the account. Now, you get a lot of email from UGA. Sometimes it's important stuff, sometimes it's not important stuff, but you can't stop it. So maybe you get an update on the menus every week at the dining halls, but you're not on a dining plan anymore. You can take those and you can just automatically delete them using filters and rules. It's a very, very fast way of helping to process email. Which leads me to a phrase called inbox zero. How many of you have in your email account when you log in dozens, hundreds, thousands of email messages sitting there in your inbox. And if you need to find something, you've got some search tools, but it's sort of overwhelming and depressing to sit there. I've had stories from students telling me that they have 4, 5, 6, 7,000 email messages sitting in their Gmail account that they've never read. One of the things that you want to do is start getting yourself down to inbox 0. This is just an efficiency thing. Now, the phrase inbox 0 comes from an online guy by the name of Merlin Mann, and he's in the process of writing a book about this. So if you go to inbox0.com, you can see what will become the website for the book in a while. But it's based off of another book called Getting Things Done. And Getting Things Done is all about efficiency and processing. Between Merlin Mann and the man who wrote Getting Things Done, they've sort of worked out this system where whenever an email comes in, there's one of only a couple of things you want to do. After you read it, you either want to respond to it if it needs a response, or delete it. Those are the two main things that you want to do. If you don't want to respond to it right now, you can move it into a temporary folder, mark something like deal with later, or archive it because you're not going to need it for a while. So the idea is to very, very quickly go through and process emails so that you're not dealing with them for a really, really long time. All right, let's talk about how the internet works a little bit. Every machine that's connected to it has an IP address, and IP stands for Internet Protocol. And what that means is there's a number associated with it. So when your computer goes looking for another computer, it knows what number it's searching for, and they're grouped together. So for instance, the IP address 128.192.126.140 is a server, and that server happens to sit here in Athens, Georgia, and that's the server that hosts uga.edu. Now, the computer wants to go find it by the number, but does anybody really want to sit there and memorize that number or other numbers for other websites that you normally address? I don't think so. So we have www.uga.edu. Now, that's the URL for the University of Georgia's home page, and URL stands for Uniform Resource Locator, just in case you're curious. And that's what you type up in the URL bar or the web address bar at the top of your browser. Now, what happens next is your computer transmits that www.uga.edu out, and it hits something called a DNS, or a domain name server. And that server has a listing of all of the URLs and their associated IP addresses. So what happens is you type in that domain name, and it queues to a number, and then the computers can go out and find the number that's associated with, or the server that's associated with that number. All right? All of that happens in the background. It's not something that you really need to think about. Something that you do want to start thinking about are domain names, because you probably want to start thinking about getting your own domain name. Now, it would be fantastic if you can go ahead and get your name or something associated with your name as your domain name, but as we've gone through more and more generations of people joining the internet, it gets harder and harder to find your domain name. Now, there's two parts to this. The first thing you've got to do is register your domain name so that you then own it, and you pay an annual fee for that, and then you need to pay another fee to host it on somebody's web server. But that's another level of complexity. So let's talk about some other things on the internet that you need to be aware of. And the next one is something called RSS, and RSS stands for Real Simple Syndication. And if you poke around on websites, you'll see this icon from time to time. And what that is that's an automatic feeding system. And it's going to push out a signal anytime they update that website. And you can create an account with an RSS reader. And what will happen is when you log into your account, it's going to go out and it's going to look at all of these different RSS feeds that you've pushed into it and tell you which ones have been updated and give you a listing. And you can get either partial text or full text depending upon how they've set up their site. Now, there's probably a couple of websites that you check on a regular basis and you've got them bookmarked. And so you go to your browser and you click on your favorite news site and your favorite gossip site and your favorite sports site and your favorite whatever sites. Instead of going and clicking on each of those individual ones in your RSS reader, you can log into one place and it'll tell you which ones have been updated and what the headlines on there are. It's a very, very quick way of dealing with a lot of different websites. So for instance, in my RSS reader, I have about 150 different websites that it checks for me. So instead of having to go click on 150 different websites, I go to my RSS reader, and what it does is it tells me which ones have been updated. So I don't have to go and look at all of these different ones that may or may not have been updated since the last time I was there. And then it allows me to mark them as read. So it takes them off of the to be read list or the unread list. Now there's two big ones out there that you should think about. Well, three big ones, I guess. The The really big one comes with a Google account, and it's called Google Reader. And it's fast, it's flexible. The one that I actually prefer is called NetVibes, NETVIBES.com, because I like the way it allows me to group different things together. So in my NetVibes account, I've got a news account, and I've got a media news tab, and I've got all of these different things that sort of group things together, and I can control it and customize it and move it around however I want. Google Reader, probably a better place to start. NetVibes is a little complex, but once you get used to it, the graphical interface I think is really nice. Another one that you could take a look at is something called Bloglines, BLOGLINES.com. It's another one that has an awful lot of folks taking a look at it. Another internet phrase that you should be familiar with is SEO, and that's search engine optimization. And SEO is really important when you start creating content. The only way that your content gets found is you either tell people it's there or people find it through a search engine. And there's a couple of different things that happen with SEO. The first thing that search engines look at is the title page on your website. And when we talk about HTML and when we talk about blogging, we're going to talk a little more about title pages. But the other thing that affects your search engine optimization is the links coming into and out of your site. If a lot of people are linking to your site, that tells the search engines that you have some level of authority, and it raises your rankings on the search engine results. So search engine optimization, we could spend an entire semester talking about SEO and how it's active and how it works. All right, let's talk about social media. Social media is a phrase that just started popping up a couple of years ago, and it's kind of an interesting idea. For a long time, web pages were static. You created content, you posted it online, you went to your next area. Social media talks about the interaction between the media and the people who are consuming it. So now we have lots and lots of websites that allow comments. We have lots and lots of websites that allow lots of people to post lots of information. So let's talk about a couple of those different things. The big one that you're probably very, very familiar with is Facebook. Facebook's only been out for a couple of years at this point in time, but it just recently passed 500 million unique users on it. 500 million people are on Facebook. And when you want to put that into context, there's only 300 million people or so in the United States. So it is a worldwide phenomenon. It's a great place to keep track of people and let people know what it is that you're doing, but it's also sort of a dangerous place because Facebook is searchable. And whenever you go out applying for internships and jobs right now, folks are going to do a Facebook search on you. They're going to see what you've posted there. So you want to be really careful and think about what's there, because what's posted online never really goes away. Facebook and Google, probably the first two things that human resources professionals are going to search for when they have an applicant for a position. There's another similar site called LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is a business-oriented site, but it's set up in a very similar manner to Facebook. You can post things there. It's a way of connecting and networking for job opportunities. You probably want to get yourself on LinkedIn at this point in time as well. Let's talk about blogs. Blogs started coming out about 8 or 10 years ago. Folks would hand code web pages and do constant updates, sort of journal entries. Blogs have this derogatory connotation to them in some people's minds because they think it's just personal journals. Blogs really cover a wide spectrum of things now, and there's a couple of different places that you can go and set up free ones. Blogger, also known as Blogspot, that's the Google-oriented one. Tumblr is another one, and Tumblr is great, particularly if you're going to do a lot of stuff with images, but the commenting on it is a little strange. But the big one that you should really be associated with is WordPress. And WordPress comes in two varieties. There's the WordPress software that you can download and install on your own server so that you can put it under your own domain name. And then there's WordPress.com, which allows you to have a hosted blog. Now, there's some limitations in it, but it's free. It's really easy to use. And in a few weeks, we're going to talk a lot more about WordPress. All of these allow commenting at some level. All of them provide RSS feeds, so they're great ways to get started with blogging. All right, the next one is Twitter. Twitter burst onto the scene about 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago now, and has sort of exploded amongst the technorati first, and now it's sort of out there into the general public. Twitter is microblogging. You should have a Twitter account. You should be using a Twitter account. You should be using it widely. Twitter posts are limited to 140 characters. And similar to a blog and following blogs with RSS feeds, when you set up a Twitter account, people can follow you, and you can then go follow other people. And what this means is when you go to your Twitter page, you see not only your posts, but the posts of the people who you are following. And you can also get added to lists or create your own lists. So for instance, I might create a Twitter list of UGA photojournalism students that are on Twitter. And then you can go in and you can follow a group of people. You can also go in and you can block people. You can have public or private Twitter feeds. Now, private ones, I would recommend against that. Since we're journalists and we're doing this stuff in the public, I would really recommend having a public one, but use it wisely. Don't Twitter about your lunch. Don't send out tweets about that, but link to other people's blog posts or news articles around an industry or a topic area that you're interested in. You may want to use Twitter to publicize blog posts that you've created out there as well. YouTube, we all know what YouTube is. It's hard to believe that 10 years ago YouTube didn't exist because it is such an integral part of so many people's lives now. It's a video hosting site, and again, you can create an account there, you can follow other people there, you can have people subscribe to your YouTube feed so that whenever you post something new, it gets listed. The other two that are out there aside from YouTube are Vimeo.com and blip.tv, blip.tv. Image quality is a little different on them. YouTube has a 10-minute limit on most of their accounts, whereas Vimeo and Blip don't have limits there. You can pay for different services here, but you should probably have one of these. And then the next one would be Flickr. Flickr is an online photo hosting site, and Flickr is another community. And all of these have a community associated with them. So you can upload your photographs in there. You can create portfolios. You can tag them, put them in groups, share photos with friends, with family members. There's various levels of privacy that you can have in there that allow you to share information. And that's really what social media is about. It's about individuals sharing information. All right, so the vocab for this week. We talked about email. We talked about email signatures. We talked a little bit about etiquette, sometimes referred to as netiquette, and the things that you want to pay attention to and worry about there. We talked about URLs, the Uniform Resource Locators. These are the names for websites that are out there. We talked a little bit about domain names and how you should be thinking about registering your own domain name. We talked about blogs and the different places that you can go and get free hosted blogs like Blogger or Tumblr or WordPress.com, which is the one that we're going to work with a little bit later on this semester. We talked about RSS feeds, real simple syndication, something that you probably want to go ahead and get yourself an RSS reader and start setting that up. We talked about search engine optimization, or SEO, the way that stuff gets found on the web. All right, so for this week, you need to go in and create a signature on your email account, on your UGA email account, and you should make sure your name is in there, possibly one other form of contact information, maybe your major in the college and university that you're at. You should join Twitter. Twitter is a great tool. If you're not already there, it's time to join. It's continuing to grow at just a ridiculous rate at this point in time, although there's a lot of question about how Twitter is going to make money over the long term, but it's something that we're going to use throughout the rest of the semester, so you want to go ahead and join that. You need to send your Twitter ID to your professor so that they can start to follow you. Your professor is on Twitter. There's an awful lot of faculty members from the Grady College that are on Twitter. If you're not sure if they are, just go ahead and ask and see if they're out there. You should also set up an RSS reader this week. Most of you probably have a Gmail account, so just go ahead and activate your Google Reader account and start adding feeds into it. You can add feeds in from news sites, from blogs that you follow, all different kinds of things. Anywhere you see that little orange icon, you can pick up an RSS feed and then copy and paste it into your RSS reader. All right, so that wraps up our second week of talking about computing and computers. Hopefully this was helpful. Again, if you have any questions, go ahead and ask your professor. They are a wonderful font of information. This series was produced for the Journalism Department of the Grady College of Journalism and Mass Communication at the University of Georgia by a grant from the James M. Cox Institute for Newspaper Management Studies.